This is So Basically 411. Here comes Drea Boise back at you with our YouTube video. And in this week's video, we're going to be going over a sect of radical traditionalist Catholics in Richmond, New Hampshire, known as the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So before anything, first let me define what is radical traditional Catholicism. So if we're going by the Southern Poverty Law Center and what their definition is, uh, radical traditional Catholicism is adherents of radical traditional Catholicism or integratism, routinely the pillory of Jews as the perpetual enemy of Christ, and reject the ecumenical efforts of the Vatican, and sometimes even assert that some of the popes have been illegitimate. Uh, these groups are incensed by the liberalizing reforms of the 1962 through 1965 Second Vatican Council, which condemned hatred for the Jews and reject the accusations that the Jews are responsible for the crucifixion of Christ. And there is a difference between this and people who identify as traditional Catholics, who tend to prefer um, that pretty much Mass gets done in Latin and so forth. So now that we got the definition of what is considered a radical traditionalist Catholic, now we can actually go on to the very specific group that we're going to be talking about today. As I mentioned before, the group's name is the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. We can trace their origins back to Father Leonard Feeney, who was a colorful priest in the church, to say the least. He was hardcore against the Catholic Church, becoming, I guess, more liberal, and he was a firm believer in
extra ecclesiam nulla salus,
which, if we're going by what the English definition of that is, outside of the church there is no salvation, which, to, I guess, oversimplify it, means that only the Catholic Church is the right church and other denominations of Christianity are wrong, and that pretty much everybody should become Catholic, and that pretty much everybody else is going to also burn in hell. So essentially what happened with this specific priest was he was preaching some really batshit crazy stuff, anti-Semitism and whatnot, and he was also fighting against the Catholic Church becoming I guess more liberal. So what ended up happening was, in 1953, he actually ended up becoming excommunicated from the church. And a short time after becoming excommunicated from the church, he ended up finding the slaves. And I guess that was his group. And then what happened was, in the 1970s, he was welcomed back into the church. And then a shortly time after that, he ended up actually passing away in 1978. In which case, there was this group. What ended up eventually happening was the group ended up, I guess, splitting off into two sects. One is in Massachusetts currently, and then the other one, which is the one that we're going to be talking about, is in Richmond, New Hampshire. And this group has, I guess, embraced this guy's teachings to the point where the Vatican has pretty much rejected him, and has said, hey, you're ruining our efforts to become, I guess, more modernized. Can you please stop calling yourselves Catholics? Also, as a way to, I guess, try to deal with this particular, I guess, sect, the Catholic Church has gone so far as to tell other Catholics who live in the area, don't attend church on their compound, and any, I guess, blessing or thing that this church does will not be considered, I guess, valid by the Catholic Church, in the sense that they will completely reject it. So also, what has happened is that they do have a school on the premises, which I have a lot of issues with that I'll get into later. But pretty much what has happened with the school is they're no longer allowed to call themselves a Catholic school. But to get around that, they essentially tell everybody that they give schooling in the Catholic tradition, but let's be honest, we already know that they're probably, teaching their bullshit, um, and under the skies of Catholicism. And then to, I guess, prove that they still try to, I guess, call themselves Catholics, they have gotten in trouble in recent years for basically trying to get donations under the skies that it was blessed from the church, when in reality it wasn't, for their specific um, Catholic school, but in reality they just are just, I guess, rejects. And if anything, they still preach a lot of the stuff that the Catholic Church has essentially gotten rid of over the course of years. Like, for example, they still tend to lean a little bit towards anti-Semitism. They have a website where they have had articles that pretty much preach for anti-Semitism, and also they're, I guess, also hardcore anti uh, LGBT, which, I mean, even though that's not entirely different from the Catholic Church, they tend to like rail hardcore against it. Um, and if anything, if we look at the monks and the nuns who are on their compound, they seem to be very, very cultish, due to the fact of how they look and the way they dress, and then also when you look at their, um, I guess, their schedule for the day, it screams a lot like, I guess, mind control. And if anything, I guess to kind of prove this, I'm going to be taking the group, and I'm going to be using Stephen Hassan's bite model, and I'm going to be applying that to this group to, I guess, determine if whether or not that they are cult-like. So before anything, I want to say I'm actually not a professional. I'm just a person who sees this stuff and is trying to apply it. Um, and overall, my thought process is, yeah, they score actually pretty high on Stephen Hassan's bite model. But before I get into that, let me define what is Stephen Hassan's bite model. So the bite model was developed by Stephen Hassan, who was a former member of the Moonies. And it's pretty much a, I guess, a test to decide if something is, or as in something like a group, could be considered a cult. And it stands for behavior, information, for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. When I take all of this stuff that this group has been known to do, and I put it, towards Stephen Hassan's bite model, they end up scoring a higher or high on the behavior control, with that being a 6. And then on the rest, for information, they score a 3. Thought control, they score a 4. And then in emotional, they score a 2. Which overall is pretty high, I would say. Overall score being 15. Um, Also, one thing I kind of want to point out is what could be described as, I guess, the mouthpiece of the group, or the person who you see constantly, like, I guess, dealing with the media and whatnot. Um, Brother Andre Marie, he was formerly went by something else. The guy comes off as like very, very charismatic, and if anything, he just seems like a really interesting guy. And also, when you look at his social media, he tends to preach a lot of the stuff and that the church believes in, and is constantly like, posting stuff to their, I guess, their propaganda site that preaches all their garbage. And if anything, I kind of want to call out one thing that I thought was interesting with this guy is the fact that he actually has a Parler account, which to me, I think that's kind of weird, because when you think of people who are on Parler, you think of like people who would be against the Catholic Church, and who probably thinks the Catholic Church is like really, really evil. Yet on the other hand, there's this, I guess, radical Catholic guy just chilling on the site, which I have to admit is kind of funny. Um, Except though it's weird too, because it's like, really. But now that we've, I guess, gotten that out of the way, now I can get into my rant about the school. So they have a school that is, I'm pretty sure it's K through 12, and it's a uh, school that's in the Catholic tradition. But let's be honest, it's pretty much a Catholic school, which I find it really kind of messed up that they have this school, and also the issue I have is due to the fact that the school is really not an entity of the Catholic Church. Exactly who's running it, and if something happens, who sees oversight of it. Now, I'm not necessarily making accusations or anything, but if we know anything about the issues with, I guess, the traditional Catholic Church, we would know that there's some pretty shady shit that has been known to, I guess, occur with the Catholic Church in the form of sexual abuse and whatnot with priests and all of that. So I find myself wondering is um, if an incident would occur at this school, exactly who's going to oversee that? I mean, the Catholic Church already does a really shitty job uh, dealing with sexual abuse allegations as it already does. So I kind of am afraid to know exactly how does a rip-off of the Catholic Church deal with accusations like this, knowing, I guess, their rival, with their rival being the real Catholic Church. I find myself wondering is, are we going to be getting a lot of reports coming in from this particular group about sexual abuse going on, and them pretty much not doing anything about it? Um, and then, which brings me to uh, what exactly are these kids being taught at this school? Um, knowing that this sect pretty much preaches anti-Semitism and whatnot, are your kids pretty much learning how to become anti-Semites? It's kind of messed up, and really, when they graduate, I guess they're going to be a little less integrated into our society than, let's say, somebody who goes to a regular public school is. And then also, speaking of integration, are these kids really being prepared to, I guess, go to college if they want to go to college? I mean, it'd be kind of messed up if one of the graduates from these schools wanted to, I guess, be a biologist, and they didn't even get the basics of evolution or got a very skewed version of it, which, if you're going to become a biologist, you can't really have. Um, and then, of course, there's the whole issue of, Catholic schools are pretty notorious for doing capital punishment on their students. And it could just be me, but I think it's kind of messed up that a kid goes to school and when they do something wrong, they get beat. It's kind of messed up when you think about it. That's it for, I guess, this week's video. If you want, you can come back on Tuesday. I should be posting a book review. We're going to be, I guess, going over the book The Mothman Prophecies by John A. Keel, and we're pretty much going to go about looking at it in a skeptical way, and we're going to be debunking some of the bullshit things that are in that book. Once again, please like, subscribe, and if you really like this, come back next week, and also please follow my social medias. They're in the description down below, and overall, you guys have a good day, and I guess I'll be seeing you guys next week, or technically Tuesday.